Welcome to Everyday Economics, a podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, president of the 501c3 nonprofit Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can check out all of our great podcasts at americastalking.com. To support podcasts such as this one, please make your tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We are recording this episode on Tuesday, November 29th, and joining me, as always, is my dear friend, Dr. Orphe Divounguy. He's a PhD economist. I know that you pay a little bit of attention to social media, and you certainly follow the news and the things that are happening in China right now around COVID and the pushback to further lockdowns and videos of like apartment buildings, being completely, locked up, and in other cases, people who have abandoned apartment buildings having all their possessions thrown out the windows by authorities. There's no shortage of this. It's a very rare glimpse into unrest in China. Very rare. China is without question, a massive economic engine, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so when you have this kind of unrest occurring in a place where a lot of things are being built, in particular, technology items are being built. What is the potential impact?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, we saw the disruption that COVID caused, and now we're moving from a zero COVID policy to riots. It's a disaster. You have companies like Apple that rely heavily on their Chinese factories.
Let me throw a stat at you real quick. I mean, this is from Bloomberg yesterday. So this came out on November 28th. Vlad Savov's piece. He said that the quote-unquote turmoil at Apple Inc.'s key manufacturing hub in Zhengzhou is likely to result in a production shortfall of close to 6 million iPhone Pro units this year, according to somebody familiar with assembly operations. It's a big number. It's kind of a
huge
wag, I would imagine. 6 million is kind of a wag. But nonetheless, I mean, that's more than just a little bit of a disruption.
Oh, absolutely. And some of Apple's manufacturing has also shifted to India, as companies are doing all they can to kind of just move away from zero COVID. And, but it's really sad. I mean, I feel for the people, because anti-government protests have erupted following the regime's, stance on COVID, zero COVID policy, but also I don't know if you heard about this apartment fire where basically locals said the fire couldn't be extinguished because of virus control barriers. And so you had people dying in an apartment building and nobody to help them because of the virus control barriers.
Yes.
I mean, what's worse?
It's getting contentious. And like I said, this is a rare glimpse for those people who have not had an opportunity to travel to China to see what China looks like on their own. I think, simply, the way that China has operated for many years, that you get to see the veneer of China. These self-taken videos on, cell phone videos, people screaming into the night in China, locked in their own apartment buildings and literally stacked dozens of stories on top of each other, in these industrialized areas. To think that they're not permitted to leave, that they're not permitted to come downstairs and to move out of the building, coupled with a reality around fire in a high rise. It's terrifying.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful for the Chinese. But Chris, do you know another country that's ever gotten true democracy, without a fight? Without, unfortunately, some pain. And the Chinese, and I mean, we haven't seen this since 1989. The Chinese are finally going on the streets and saying, you know what, enough is enough, and good for them. Unfortunately,
COVID, which I find to be fascinating, right? I mean, Tiananmen Square, very different scenario. So many people around the world have been affected by COVID, perhaps none more than the Chinese people. So
Absolutely. It's
fascinating to see, what they're doing and what will be allowed to persist. That is the point of conflict. The real, I believe, the real intrigue around this point of conflict is how much of this will China allow to continue.
Right.
Because that's not their
That's right.
that's not that's not government's perspective. That's not President Xi's perspective at all. So we'll have to see how long this is allowed to persist.
Absolutely.
In the meantime,
Absolutely.
I mean, and not to take away from the humanity of this, but I mean, in everyday economics, we do try to make sense of this. What does it mean? And it's not just Apple. We could talk about 6 million handsets that aren't going to come to market. What does this mean, frankly, for production in general, as it pertains to China and the unrest?
Yeah, it's further pressures on global supply chains. And so when we were talking about inflation coming down, unrest in China is another major headwind. And so that's a problem, right? So we're hoping prices will finally cool. And now we have another big shock. That's what that means for the rest of the world, and it's sad. It's sad news for the people. It's sad news in China, more so than everybody else, but it's also sad news for the rest of us who were hoping to start to see global inflation come down from its high. And we're seeing some of that, but we need the economy, the Chinese economy as well, to get back to somewhat normal. And things like this complicate an existing problem.
Big fan of normal. Big fan of Orphe Divounguy. For Dr. Orphe Divounguy, this is Chris Krug. You've been listening to Everyday Economics. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other quality podcasts at americastalking.com.